everyone. I think we can start. Thank you for joining. It's a pleasure to have you as our guests. I think other people will also be joining us throughout the event. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Liza. I'm Community Manager of the World Vapers Alliance, and this is the first ever Twitter Space discussion series of Vaper's Voice. We'll be running more of the episodes of Vaper's Voice in the future, so I hope it will be interesting for you. While you are in our discussion, we would appreciate if you could tweet out about our event to make sure that others can also join and listen in. We will have some time for the Q&A in the end of the event, so if you have any questions at the end, make sure to press the request button on the left bottom of your screen so that I can give you some time to speak. Today we'll have a very special guest from South Africa. It's Kurt Yo, who is leading the local vaping association from Vaping Saved My Life. Vaping Saved My Life is also WVA's partner organization, and we collaborate to advocate for vaping and vaping communities. The reason we decided to talk about South Africa today is that the government signaled its intention to implement a tax on vaping. The National Treasury has published a discussion paper outlining a proposal on the taxation of electronic nicotine and non-nicotine delivery systems. Today, we will discuss what's in this paper and which aspects of it might be alarming for vapers. Until we hear what Kurt has to say about the ongoing situation in Africa, I just want to welcome Kurt, first of all, and start our conversation with a short introduction about you, Kurt. It's very interesting what are the stories that eventually lead people to activism. So could you tell our listeners a little bit about your personal vaping journey?
Hello, Lisa. Yes, thank you for the invite and thank you for the opportunity for us to discuss this. I hope everybody can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you well.
Excellent. Yeah, so I started vaping around about 8 years ago, and that was after me being a smoker for 20 years. And at the height of my smoking addiction, I was smoking 40 plus cigarettes a day. Back in those days, we didn't really have vape shops or anything like that. And I started off with one of those small cigarettes, and that was probably around about 9.5, 10 years ago, but it just didn't do the thing. And then I bumped into a guy that was selling vapes from the back or from the boot of his car. And at that point, I'd really convinced myself that I had to quit. But subsequently, or during that time, it was just a very hard struggle to quit the cigarettes. And literally within 3 days of me picking up that vape, I had stopped smoking. And since then, I haven't touched a cigarette.
Thank you, Kurt, for sharing your personal story. And I think it's very important to share such personal stories. So if you haven't done so, WVA is a platform which allows to do so and to share your personal vaping stories, because policymakers should listen to them eventually. Back to you, Kurt. I'm also wondering, what is your journey from being a vapor to being a leader of the Vaping Association? How was Vaping Saved My Life founded, and what does it stand for?
Well, when I left my job in the corporate world, I decided to start a small vape shop in the city that I stay. It's Benoni in South Africa, and it was probably not probably wasn't the greatest idea because I'm not a retailer kind of guy, but I found myself being roped into some of the science around vaping, some of the events that were happening around the world. And also, I think a lot of people around the world experience the same thing, is that there's such a strong community with vapers. They share, they talk a lot, and it becomes a very tight-knit community. And then while we were just talking the one day, we noticed that, or we realized that there was going to be some issues around vaping because the negative press and the negative sentiment around vaping started to grow. And during the 2000 and beginning of 2017, our former health minister publicly stated that if it was up to him, he would ban smoking and vaping tomorrow. And a good friend of mine who's in the vaping industry, who runs a very successful vape business here in South Africa, and I were beginning to chat. And we said, "Well, what can we do to try uplift or promote vaping as it ought to be, or how it should be seen, how it should be deemed?" And we decided to create a Facebook page where people could upload their vaping stories and then tell us, tell the other smokers or other people around the world that what it meant to them and how it changed their lives. And in July, I think it was July 2017, we launched the Facebook page. Yes, that's pretty much where it started.
Thank you, Kurt. I think our listeners now have a very good understanding of what Vaping Saves My Life does. You can follow VCML for more updates. We'll make sure to tweet out about it as well. Let's move on to the topic of the day, vaping in South Africa. So unlike conventional tobacco products, electronic nicotine delivery systems are mostly unregulated in South Africa as of now. But the situation might change. In the discussion paper published by this National Treasury, we can sense a clear intention of South African government to implement a tax on vaping. So could you please elaborate what is said in the discussion paper? What type of tax might be implemented, and what is the reasoning behind all of it?
Well, we currently have two pieces of paper that are in the process. First of all, we got the regulation, which is the actual act or bill, which was released in 2018, and that talks about regulating vaping products the same way as they regulate cigarettes or tobacco products in South Africa. And that bill hasn't really progressed anywhere. We're still waiting to see if it's going to be presented to our cabinet during the course of the year. But then we received a discussion document from our National Treasury to start talking about taxing vaping products in South Africa. And that was released on the 15th of December last year. And the deadline for that was actually for today for comments, to pass comments on the paper that was released. We're very fortunate that we convinced National Treasury to give us an additional 2 weeks, because we felt that during the December period, from the 16th of December for 2 weeks, a lot of South Africans and a lot of businesses close for the December holidays. And we felt that disadvantaged us somehow because we didn't have a sufficient amount of time to create a proper response. So, in essence, what the document is currently stating is a hybrid tax system. So, taxing on the volume of the liquid, as well as a tax on the nicotine strength of that particular product. There's no discussion on hardware and there's no discussion on accessories. It's just purely on the e-liquids at this point in time. And they're literally talking, and I'm going to have to speak in South African currency. They're talking around about 87 cents per milliliter, plus a 2 rand and 3 cents per milligram. And that's just on one of the options. They have provided additional 2 options, but the option that they seem to be leaning towards is that option because it's expressly stated in the executive summary. Pretty much, if those figures are implemented, we're looking at anywhere between a 20 to 200% increase on prices.
Thank you, Kurt. And that brings me to my next question, because we see that usually restrictive policies on vaping, including high taxation, lead to implications that are nothing but counterproductive. So one of these examples can be the possibility for illicit markets to emerge when we're talking about carrying out higher taxes on such products. So what do you think are the outcomes of the proposed hybrid excise tax, as you have already mentioned?
Well, I think, Lisa, if it's kept at this current rate, which we certainly hope it wouldn't be, and we must add that this is just the beginning of the process. It's a discussion document, but South Africa has a significant problem with illicit trade. If we look at the tobacco trade currently in South Africa, according to the IPOS papers, South Africa's illicit trade is greater or bigger than the regulated trade of tobacco. So there was a study that was done, and basically what it indicated is that for every 3 cigarettes sold in South Africa, 2 of them are illicit. So you can imagine the size or the scale of the problem over there. So what Vaping Saved My Life did is we actually did a quick snap survey, and once again relying on our communities to jump in and to provide feedback. And in the survey, we particularly asked around the impact of this price or of this tax, and what routes would they take. And fortunately, as we stand now, we're looking at 1,800 people have taken the survey. And, the interesting thing is that the majority of the people were ex-smokers. Almost all of them said that smoking had helped them quit or cut down on cigarettes. And what we also discovered, which is quite shocking, but not too much of a surprise to us, is that at this point in time, 35% of those users would resort to an informal trade, or relying on informal trade and not buying regulated products. The other alarming figures are 23% of those people would just go back to smoking. So from a public health perspective, it is a disaster, and also for a fledgling industry in South Africa, which is majority, like we've seen everywhere else in the world, the majority of our vape shops and vape manufacturers are small businesses. That would literally decimate the industry as it stands.
First of all, it's very impressive that you have already launched the survey and gathered so many responses. And congratulations on it. And we'll also talk about your activities a bit later. But going back to the document, so in this discussion paper, it was clearly emphasized that South Africa is signatory to the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Products, so-called FCTC, and that it will follow their advice to take precautionary approach. I wanted to ask you, how do you think vaping is generally perceived in this document? Because for the majority of people who vape, vaping is a getaway tool from smoking. But are these facts taken into consideration in this document? I'm just wondering if vaping is considered as a smoking cessation method that brings public health benefits, or it is perceived from a different angle, because you've already mentioned that vaping is treated the same way as smoking.
Yeah, so I think it's generally accepted that the South African government, particularly the Department of Health, doesn't see any benefit in vaping. They don't see it as a sensation method. And they do take a lot. In fact, that almost everything that they talk around tobacco as well as vaping is aligned to what we see coming out of the World Health Organization. And it is a bit of a tough dilemma we face, because not only do they just accept the World Health Organization standing, but they refuse to even interact with us. Since 2018, when that regulation, which was raised by the Department of Health, was gazetted in South Africa, this organization had literally 15 minutes to present its case. So we've only literally had 15 minutes to discuss our point of view around vaping as a consumer organization, and that applied to all the other stakeholders. They only got 15 minutes, and we haven't had any other interaction with them whatsoever. So if we look at the discussion document from the tax, it's almost a carbon copy of what we're seeing coming out of the Department of Health. Sorry if you can hear the barking there. So yes, there is definitely a lot of stuff in the current document. I mean, they even refer to things like popcorn lung, the Avali situation. They talk about myocarditis and even rely on Professor Stanton Glance's one paper. And yeah, there's a lot of misinformation, misrepresentation, and very little balance to how they presented vaping in this discussion document.
Right. So it's been only mentioned, I think, once or twice that vaping is a harm can serve as a harm reduction method. Otherwise, there were mostly different arguments. And my next question is generally about the overall situation, because it seems to me that we are encountering the similar problems in South Africa as we do in other countries. As we discussed, vaping is treated the same way as smoking. So the discussion paper itself clearly indicates that a draft control tobacco products and electronic delivery system bill will aim to regulate electronic nicotine and non-nicotine delivery systems like tobacco products. But the regulation itself is described quite vaguely, and that it all somehow gives me a sense that the proposed tax is just the beginning. So apart from the proposed tax, do you anticipate that the South African government might be aiming for more and more restrictions? For instance, I recall the flavors also were mentioned there as a threat, and they were cited as the main reason the youth is trying this product. So I'm wondering if that is also a signal that the restrictions will go further and further. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if they treat the vaping products the same as tobacco, then literally there's no way that a vape shop could even exist, because products cannot be displayed, plain packaging, no advertising on social media, which would include WhatsApps, no websites, and practically the product will be kept underneath the shelf, and that's as far as it goes. There's even a study that some of the university in South Africa published that they had an issue that 65% of vape shops were located within a 20 kilometer radius of a university. So there is a lot of these. Even if they just take the existing proposed bill and put it in place, you will not be able to see a vape product on display anywhere. And if you do, it would be in a plain box. So you can imagine that a lot of these small shops would not be able to survive, particularly if you consider that we use the social medias a lot to promote these products and to discuss these products. If the regulation passes, we won't be able to even have WhatsApp groups aligned with vaping.
Wow, this is very unfortunate, but that brings me to my next question, because I know that Vaping Saved My Life is very actively involved in vape advocacy, and I know that you have been putting a lot of effort to oppose the potential tax on vaping. You have already mentioned that you have launched the SNAP survey, and the results are very impressive from it. If you could share, or if you have any links to that survey or the results, please feel free to share. But other than that, could you tell a little bit about your activities with Vaping Saved My Life as an answer to the proposed tax? What are you planning to do, and what do you expect the feedback will be or the results will be from your activities?
Well, I mean, we've always built on testimonials because we believe the stories are the stories of people is probably the most important. So we will always beg and plead and get our community activated to share those stories. And there's some remarkable stories out there, really remarkable stories, and that will be the cornerstone of what we always do. Every year, South Africa conducts, or the Vaping Save My Life conducts, a Vapers survey. The only time we missed one was in 2020, and that was because we had to focus on a petition to raise or to lift the sales ban
Yeah, I can
because,
hear you
okay,
now.
sorry, as a
Thank you. I
response
think
to
it
the
might be a
pandemic, South
problem with my
African
internet. Cord,
government,
I think
well, we're in
we are
South
losing
Africa,
you
so I wouldn't put
because
it past
the
us.
sound is
We're very
breaking up.
far away from everybody else. So, I mean, Basic, basically, I don't know how much you heard, but we have every year we do a vapor survey. The only time we never did a vapor survey was in 2020, where we did a petition, and that petition was to request the government or ask the government to lift the sales ban, which was basically a response to the pandemic, where the South African government banned the sale of all tobacco related products, which included nicotine, e-cigarettes. So what we do is that every year we do the survey and we then ask questions around smoking history, how long they vape, their chosen devices, their nicotine strength, the type of flavors they do. And we feel this is vitally important because when we follow the science, vapors are typically ignored in this particular discussion. And we feel that surveying these particular users and their understanding of or the patterns is critical to share that level of science to policymakers. So yes, we focus on that. Obviously, we have our research repository, which we keep on our website, which will help anybody out there that might be confused around the science of vaping. So we keep that updated as much as possible. And then we also try submit open letters to the press, and in the hope that they will be able to print them or at least publish them for us. And then generally we try and help the rest of people, the rest of the vaping alliances out there, or advocates out there, when there is an issue. Because I believe that as vapers, or as associations, our strength is in our numbers. And that's the only real way that we can challenge some of these draconian regulations and laws.
Thanks so much for your answer, Kurt. It's really impressive what you're doing, and I hope you will have a lot of success with that. We're moving slowly to the conclusion and the final part of our discussion. And before I ask my final question, I just want to remind the audience that we are open for the Q&A. And if you have any questions, please press the request button so that I can give you some time to speak. Back to you, Kurt. So vaping is under threat in many parts of the world, and I think that the way the South African government is basing its arguments on the policies and the legislations that other countries have already carried out is a very good example of why it is important to follow and care about what is happening in other countries. What would you say to the international vaping community? How do you think they can stand for vaping and make their voices heard?
I think we just got to go back to basics. I mean, I think we need to promote vaping and promote the science around it. We need to rebut and fight where we see that there is misrepresentation. We need to definitely activate our users. We've got to make their voices heard. And yes, I mean, particularly in the times that we're facing now, a lot of people are just tired and there's a lot of apathy out there, but we just need to chip away at it, constantly chip away at it. There is no silver bullet the way I see it. We need to challenge them at every point and at every juncture and challenge them with facts and evidence. And on top of that, with stories. We can't just let governments and policymakers, and particularly some of the health institutes out there, just sweep over us. We've seen this on many, many times where customers or patients have just literally been ignored. And we should just not do that. So constantly chipping away at it and making sure that we are present all the time, that we don't drop that ball. We're present and we're there and we respond, but we respond with evidence and respond with facts, and do it like that. That's my opinion.
Thanks so much, Court. You have provided a very detailed and in-depth analysis on the situation in South Africa, and I just hope you will keep up the great job that you're doing and will win more and more battles in favor of vaping. And thank you for your time and for being with us today. I don't see any additional questions in the audience so far, but you can always reach out to Court or Vaping Saved My Life, follow them and follow their activities. So thank you very much, Court, for being here with us today. It was an absolute pleasure.
No, thank you, Lisa. Yes, I can look in the room. Yeah, we've got a lot of experts, so they can probably teach me a thing or two. But yeah, I think the World Vaper Alliance is a very important organization, and I'm very proud to be a partner from the very beginning. And thank you guys for all the work and assisting us where you have. And yes, it's going to be a tough year for South Africa. But we'll give it our best. That's all we can do.
Definitely, and let's hope for the best. It has been a pleasure once again. To our dear listeners, I just want to thank you for being here with us today. I just want to remind you this is the first ever Twitter Space discussion that we have hosted, but we'll be back in 2 weeks to discuss more about vaping and policies around vaping globally. So have a great day or night, depending on where you are. My name is Liza, and this was the discussion called Vaper's Voice, hosted by the World Vapers Alliance, and stay tuned for the next episode.